Hello, friends. If you are receiving Social Security right now, or if you are getting close to the age where you will be, I need you to stop whatever you are doing and pay close attention to what I am about to tell you, because this week delivered two pieces of news that will directly affect the money in your pocket and the long-term security of your retirement. And most people have no idea either of these things even happened. Not from the evening news, not from their bank, not from the Social Security Administration itself. Two separate announcements, both dropped within days of each other, and together they paint a picture of where Social Security is heading that every single person over 60 in this country needs to understand right now. The first came out on June 9th and involves a deadline that just moved closer than it was last year, and not in a good direction. The second came out on Thursday, June 13th, based on the latest inflation numbers released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it is the kind of news that puts more money in your pocket on paper, but with a catch that most financial commentators are completely skipping over. Today, I am breaking both of these down in plain language, explaining what they actually mean for your specific situation, and telling you exactly what you need to do, or not do, about each one. Before we get into it, please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on the notification bell. What I am covering today is breaking news as of this week, and this is exactly the kind of thing I track week in and week out so that you do not have to go digging through government reports to figure out what is actually happening to your benefits. Subscribe now, and let's get into it. Let's start with the announcement from Monday, June 9th, because this one involves a clock, and that clock just moved. Every single year, the Treasury Department and the Social Security Administration publish an official government document called the Trustees Report. This report lays out the complete financial health of the Social Security system and tells us, based on current projections, how long the money is going to last. It is the most authoritative document that exists on the future of Social Security, and this year's version was released on June 9th, 2026, and the headline number you need to write down is 2032. That is when the primary Social Security Retirement Fund, officially known as the OASI Trust Fund, which stands for Old Age and Survivors Insurance, is now projected to run out of its reserves entirely. Now, I want to be really precise here because this is where the news coverage tends to get either too scary or not scary enough, and neither extreme actually helps you. The trust fund running out of reserves does not mean Social Security disappears. Social Security will still be collecting payroll taxes from every working American in 2032 and beyond. The program is not going away. What running out of reserves means is that those incoming payroll taxes alone, without any reserve cushion, are only projected to be enough to cover 78% of what beneficiaries are currently owed. Let me say that again in concrete terms, because the math here is what matters. If the trust fund runs out in late 2032 and Congress has done nothing between now and then, the law actually requires automatic, across-the-board benefit cuts of 22% for every single recipient. Not just new claimants, not just younger retirees. Every person receiving Social Security, regardless of age, health, how long they have been collecting, or how much they paid into the system over their working life, would see their check shrink by 22%. On the current average Social Security benefit of $2,081 per month, a 22% cut means $458 less every single month. For someone receiving $1,500 per month, that is $330 gone from your monthly budget. For someone receiving $2,500, that is $550 less hitting your bank account every month, starting potentially in the fourth quarter of 2032. These are not hypothetical numbers pulled from thin air. These are the mathematically projected consequences of inaction under current federal law, as stated directly in the trustees' report itself. And the reason I am emphasizing this right now is because the depletion date just moved forward again for the second consecutive year. Last year's trustees' report projected the trust fund would run out sometime in the first quarter of 2033. This year, that projection moved to the fourth quarter of 2032, a full quarter earlier. Now, I know one quarter sounds like a small shift. It sounds like the kind of thing you could easily dismiss as within the margin of error, but here is why this particular shift matters more than it might seem. This is the second year in a row that the projection has moved in the wrong direction. When you have a trend moving consistently toward depletion, and then external policy changes accelerate that trend, you are not looking at a minor data fluctuation. You are looking at a structural shift. And the trustees' report itself explains exactly why the date moved this time around. The One Big Beautiful Bill, which was signed into law in 2025, included provisions that reduced the amount of income tax that Social Security beneficiaries pay on their benefits. On the surface, that sounds like good news for retirees, and in your monthly take-home situation, in the short term, it is. If you are paying less tax on your Social Security income right now, that is real money staying in your pocket today. But here is what most of the coverage of that bill never fully explained. A portion of the income taxes that seniors pay on their Social Security benefits gets recycled back into the Social Security Trust Fund itself. When you reduce that tax burden for retirees, you are also reducing one of the revenue streams that helps keep the fund solvent. The One Big Beautiful Bill gave seniors a short-term benefit and, at the same time, quietly accelerated the timeline toward a much larger long-term problem. The response from the policy and advocacy community was swift. The American Association of Retired Persons put out a formal statement on June 9th calling on Congress to take immediate bipartisan action. The American Academy of Actuaries issued a report within 24 hours noting that the window for gradual, manageable reform is narrowing significantly. The Bipartisan Policy Center echoed that warning, pointing out that every year Congress delays is a year where the eventual changes required become more severe, more sudden, and harder to absorb for the people depending on the program. There is a well-established pattern in how Social Security reform works. The longer Congress waits, the fewer options they have, and the more painful the eventual solution becomes for somebody, whether that is benefit cuts, tax increases, or some combination of both. So what does all of this mean for you practically right now? If you are already receiving Social Security, I want to be direct with you about this. Nothing changes today, nothing changes tomorrow, nothing changes next month or next year. The current benefit system is fully funded under current law through 2032. This is not a situation where you need to call the SSA, make a panicked financial decision, or do anything dramatic in the next few weeks. What it is critical information you need to have in your head so that when you start hearing politicians talk about Social Security reform over the next few years, and you will hear about it constantly because we are now under 7 years from that deadline, you understand with clarity what the actual stakes are. A 22% automatic benefit cut is not a talking point. It is the mathematically projected outcome of inaction under the current law, and you deserve to make every decision about your retirement, your housing, your health care, and your savings with that number clearly in mind. If you have not yet claimed Social Security, this trustee's report adds a layer to an already complicated decision. Claiming earlier means locking in a benefit level before any potential legislative changes take effect. Waiting until 70 means higher monthly payments for the rest of your life. But it also means more of your monthly income is riding on Congress doing something meaningful before 2032. I am not here to tell you that one approach is definitively right because it genuinely depends on your health, your other sources of income, your family situation, and your honest assessment of what you believe Congress will or will not do. But I'm here to tell you that you need to be making that decision with the most accurate, current information available. And as of June 9th, 2026, this is that information. Now let's move to the second piece of news from this week, because this one directly affects the size of the check you will receive starting in January 2027, and the early numbers are looking more significant than most people expected. This announcement came on Thursday, June 13th, based on the May 2026 inflation data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Here is how the system works, because understanding the mechanics matters if you want to understand the number. Every year in October, the Social Security Administration officially announces the next year's cost of living adjustment, which is what people refer to as COLA. That adjustment is calculated using a specific inflation measure called the CPI-W, which stands for the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. The SSA looks specifically at CPI-W readings from July, August, and September of the current year, and the average change in that 3-month window compared to the same 3 months a year earlier determines exactly what your January benefit increase will be. The official 2027 COLA announcement will not come until October, but there is a group of independent analysts and advocacy organizations that track the monthly inflation data as it comes in throughout the year, and they publish early estimates so that retirees have a sense of which direction things are heading long before October arrives. This week, those estimates moved meaningfully upward. As of May 2026, the CPI-W is running at 4.4% year over year. That is the highest reading this measure has hit in 3 full years, and it is being driven primarily by energy costs. Gasoline prices and utility bills have both spiked sharply due to ongoing geopolitical pressures in global energy markets, and food prices are continuing to climb faster than the headline numbers that you see in the news tend to suggest. Mary Johnson, one of the most respected independent analysts who has been tracking COLA calculations for decades, updated her 2027 estimate on Thursday to 4.7%. She also noted there is a meaningful likelihood that number could move even higher as the July, August, and September data comes in, which are the months that actually determine the final figure. The Senior Citizens League, which is a nonpartisan senior advocacy organization that also tracks this data closely, is currently projecting 3.8%. So you have got a range right now of roughly 3.8% to 4.7%, with the most current inflation data pointing toward the higher end of that range. To put those numbers into real dollar terms for you, the 2026 COLA was 2.8%, which added approximately $56 to the average monthly Social Security benefit. A 4.7% COLA in 2027 would add approximately $98 to the average monthly benefit, nearly double this year's dollar increase. On a monthly benefit of $2,500, that is an additional $117 coming in every month starting in January. On a benefit of $1,500, you would be looking at an additional $70 per month. And now I want to get to the part that I really need you to sit with for a moment, because this is the nuance that almost never gets covered when people talk about COLA announcements, and it is the most important thing to understand about what a higher adjustment actually means for your real-world financial situation. A higher COLA sounds like great news. And in raw dollar terms, more money is genuinely better than less money. I am not going to pretend otherwise. But here is what a higher COLA actually signals. It signals that inflation is rising faster than it was before. The COLA does not create new purchasing power for you. It attempts to keep pace with purchasing power you would otherwise be losing. And the critical question is always whether the adjustment keeps up with what things actually cost. Here is the gap that nobody is talking about enough. The 2.8% COLA you received back in January 2026 raised the average monthly benefit by $56. But according to Mary Johnson's analysis, at current May 2026 inflation levels, it would actually cost you approximately $94 more per month to maintain the same purchasing power you had in January 2025. Let me be very clear about what that means. Your check went up $56, but the cost of maintaining your actual standard of living went up $94. That $38 gap between what the COLA gave you and what inflation actually took is happening quietly every single month, and it compounds. And this is not a one-year problem. The Senior Citizens League has been tracking this gap for years, and the cumulative effect since 2010 is that Social Security benefits have lost approximately 20% of their purchasing power, even accounting for every COLA increase that has been paid out in that period. The reason this gap exists is structural, and it comes down to how the CPI-W is calculated. The CPI-W was designed to measure the spending patterns of working-age urban workers. It reflects what a 35-year-old purchasing agent in Chicago spends money on. It was never designed to capture the actual cost of living for a retired 72-year-old in rural Georgia or a 68-year-old managing 3 prescriptions in suburban Florida. Older Americans spend a much higher proportion of their income on healthcare, prescription drugs, and housing, and all 3 of those categories tend to inflate significantly faster than the categories that carry the most weight in the CPI-W formula. So even when the COLA keeps up with the index it is tied to, it structurally underperforms for the actual spending needs of the people it is supposed to protect. A higher number in 2027 does not fix this problem. It just means the system is partially compensating for an inflation environment that is actively eroding your financial position right now. That context matters enormously given another number that came out this week. According to a survey released by the Senior Citizens League in conjunction with their COLA update, 44% of retirees, representing approximately 24.8 million Americans, now report that Social Security is their only source of income. That is not most of their income or a significant portion of their income. It is their only income. And that number was 39% just 1 year ago. In a single year, 5 additional percentage points of the retiree population moved from having some other source of income to having none. When you are living entirely on a single income stream, a gap of $38 per month between what your COLA provides and what your actual costs require is not an abstraction. It is a very real pressure that shows up at the grocery store, at the pharmacy counter, and on the utility bills. So here is exactly what I want you to take away from the COLA news this week. The 2027 adjustment is shaping up to be meaningfully larger than this year's, and that is a genuinely good development in dollar terms. If you are currently receiving Social Security, you can reasonably expect a more substantial increase landing in your January 2027 payment than you received at the start of this year. But I want you to hold 2 things in your mind at the same time. More money is better, and more money that still falls short of what things actually cost is not a solution. The practical implication is this: do not make any major financial decisions right now based on an early COLA projection. The official number will not be set until October, and 5 more months of inflation data, specifically the July, August, and September readings, will determine exactly what you receive. If energy prices stabilize or come down over the summer, the final COLA could settle closer to the 3.8% end of the range. If the current inflationary pressures continue or intensify, you could see it land even above 4.7%. Watch for the official announcement in October. What you know right now is simply that the trajectory is upward. And that is useful information to have as you think through your budget and your financial planning for next year. Let me bring both of these stories together for you now because they are connected in a way that I think is worth spelling out clearly. On one hand, you have a potential 2027 COLA that is larger than anything we have seen in the last few years, which reflects a more inflationary economic environment that is actively squeezing the purchasing power of everyone on a fixed income right now. On the other hand, you have a Social Security trust fund that is now projected to hit a critical breaking point in the fourth quarter of 2032, a deadline that just moved closer for the second year in a row, with a 22% automatic cut as the mathematical consequence of congressional inaction. These two things are happening simultaneously. The monthly check may get a meaningful boost in January, and the long-term foundation the whole system rests on is under more pressure than it was 12 months ago. You need to understand both of those realities at the same time if you want a clear picture of where things actually stand. Here is your complete summary for this week. The 2026 Trustees Report, released on June 9th, moved the Social Security Trust Fund depletion date forward to the fourth quarter of 2032, 1 quarter earlier than last year's projection, and the second consecutive year the date has moved in the wrong direction. If Congress does not act before that date, benefits would be automatically cut by 22% for every recipient regardless of age or circumstance. The One Big Beautiful Bill's senior tax provisions played a role in accelerating this timeline by reducing one of the revenue streams that flows back into the fund. Nothing changes for your benefits today, but the window for gradual and manageable reform is now officially under 7 years, and that window is closing. On the COLA front, the 2027 adjustment is currently projected between 3.8% and 4.7% based on May 2026 inflation data, driven primarily by energy and food costs. That would nearly double the dollar increase you received at the start of this year, but the final number will not be set until October, and it reflects an inflationary environment that is already eroding purchasing power faster than most annual adjustments can fully offset. More money is coming, and the cost of everything you need is climbing to meet it. If this kind of information is valuable to you, please share this video with someone else in your life who depends on Social Security. They deserve to have this information too, and most of them are not going to find it unless someone they trust sends it to them. Subscribe to this channel, turn on the bell, and I will be right here every single week breaking down exactly what is happening with your benefits, your Medicare, and every policy change that affects your retirement security. I will see you in the next one.